with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, February 6th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Gary Orfield, professor and co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA, author of The Walls Around Opportunity, the Failure of Colorblind Policy for Higher Education. Also on the program today, massive 7.8 earthquake in Turkey leaves thousands dead and counting. Meanwhile, U.S. shoots down a Chinese balloon off of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Pentagon reports multiple balloons crossings happened during the Trump administration as well. Yet, here we all are. New poll shows just 37% of Democrats want Biden to run for re-election. DNC moves South Carolina to first place in the primaries, then New Hampshire and Nevada, then Georgia, then Michigan. States passed legislation curbing drag shows across the country. Ron DeSantis is pulling liquor licenses of venues that hold drag shows. And Florida, meanwhile, contemplates collecting menstrual information from female student athletes.
That's good. I mean, your periods are embarrassing enough as is. As a teenager, now you've got to share it with the state?
There you go. Just making sure you got them. Koch Network will actively support a Trump primary challenge. And a train derailment causes evacuations in Ohio for fear of hazardous material. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday fun day, as it were. Joining us here in the fun, Emma Vigland, of course.
Just basking
she does
in the
every
fun.
week. Yes.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that Republicans are a little bit obsessed with teenagers' genitalia.
Well, I mean, they are. I mean, this is if you believe, like I do, that the Republican Party is at least significantly, if not fundamentally and primarily motivated by religious fundamentalism, then yeah, that is actually one of their primary functions, making sure that females, women, that they function to provide babies and to be in the kitchen, and that's basically it. So let's get to some of these clips. Will you turn down your microphone because we were picking up your papers? The huge natural disaster in Turkey, or I should say earthquake that has turned into a disaster. We just have footage of an antique store, just to give you a sense of what's going on in there. But I mean, if you've seen the footage of the devastation in Turkey and in Syria, I think at this point, what did you say? They were up to 2,500?
2,300 as of 2 hours ago, but we just got to say thousands because it's going to keep climbing, right?
It's going to keep climbing. And they're just, beginning to dig out from the rubble. And I imagine there's going to be aftershocks, too, coming that are also going to be problematic. But just give you a sense of what really is amazing about this earthquake, it's not only that it was 7.6 on the Richter scale, which is just massive, but also how long it lasts. This is really nuts. You can see it in this video here from, I guess, CCTV footage in an antique store in Gaziantep, Turkey. I mean, it just gives you a sense of the length of time that was going on. I think it was even actually went on a couple of seconds longer than that. But that's just extraordinary. And the devastation is just massive, really massive. Over the next day or two, we will have maybe some links for where you can donate if you're interested in helping there. It is really just, I mean, just amazing.
And there was an aftershock too, right?
I would imagine.
It's just there's always going to be those after those kinds of earthquakes, but it didn't stop there. Doctors Without Borders is a good place to start, but there's going to be a lot more organizations that are going to be coming in there to provide relief, and it's going to be thousands of people. All right, in a moment, we're going to be talking to Gary Orfield, professor, co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA, author of The Walls Around Opportunity, The Failure of Colorblind Policy for Higher Education. This is a book that came out last year, spring of last year, and anticipating the Supreme Court's looking at two different cases of affirmative action. Those cases are going to be resolved in June. And people need to start getting prepared for more inequity in our higher education programs. We're seeing this also, frankly, on in K through 12 as well. But this is going to exacerbate that problem. But we'll be talking to him in a moment. Got a couple words from our sponsors today. You get on your web browser, put on incognito. I guess you can do that on your phone too. But because, like the Chrome browser itself, it's a Google product, Google has made its fortune by tracking your movements online. So how do you actually make yourself as invisible as possible? Well, you use ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN allows you, even when you're in incognito mode, it will keep your online activity untracked, as it were. As you know, data harvesters use your IP to uniquely identify you and your location. They'll serve up ads and then gosh knows what else. Your connection with ExpressVPN gets routed through an encrypted server that is, you choose where you want it. Your IP address is masked. That makes it harder for third parties to identify you. Also allows you to maybe see content in other parts of the country that you, or world, I should say, that you can't see here. I've also found that it can mess with prices, like on places like Amazon. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's weird. I think
life hack.
I think they honestly look and see where you're buying from and then adjust prices there. I mean, it's not massive, but it's interesting. ExpressVPN, also super easy to use. Doesn't matter what device you're on, phone, laptop, smart TV. All you got to do is tap one button and you get instant protection. So if you really want to go incognito and protect your privacy, secure yourself with the #1 rated VPN, visit expressvpn.com/majority. You get 3 extra months for free at that link. That's expressvpn.com/majority. Go to expressvpn.com/majority to learn more and get those 3 extra months free. Also, today's program sponsored by ZBiotics. This is the thing that keeps me from feeling like a total disaster the day after the day after an evening when I have maybe a drink or two, maybe a couple of more. The way it works, and this is something that I did not know. I always assumed that the primary reason why you would feel crappy the next day after drinking is because you're dehydrated. But no, turns out to be a byproduct of alcohol in your gut. And ZBiotics is a pre-alcohol probiotic. It is the only product that breaks it down. So what you got to do is you just got to drink responsibly, get a good night of sleep, have a small bottle of the ZBiotics before you have a drink or two or however many you have. And then in the morning, you're all set. You want to work out, you're going to feel okay. You want to go in, do a podcast, you're going to feel okay. I mean, that just assumes that your kids don't wake you up and the cat doesn't poop all over the place.
Right.
That ZBiotics cannot
in any
control
way, for that.
Cannot control for that. But like I say, ZBiotics, I took a bunch of this on that cruise I went on. Lifesaver.
Yeah.
Because, you're on a boat. You're getting a little bit excited, and sometimes you can go overboard. But the next morning, I got to do panels. I got to do stuff like that. It was fine. Get 15% off your first order of ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic by clicking the link in the description box and using our code majority at checkout. Go to zbiotics.com/majority. You can find that in our YouTube and podcast description. 15% off your first order. I think you can get it now, still in time. Maybe, I don't know.
For the Super Bowl, it's on Sunday. Yeah,
maybe tricky. Right.
Either way, stock up. I mean,
yeah, indeed.
The summer's coming up too. Eventually, you want to have that on hand.
That's right. zbiotics.com/majority. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Gary Orfield. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Joining us, Gary Orfield. He is a professor and co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA, author of The Walls Around Opportunity, The Failure of Colorblind Policy for Higher Education.
The audio I'm getting from you is very garbled.
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. We're going to have to take a break, and we'll fix that in a minute. We'll be right back, folks. Sorry about this. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. On the phone, we have Gary Orfield, professor and co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA, author, The Walls Around Opportunity, The Failure of Colorblind Policy for Higher Education. Professor, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be with you.
Let's start in with the failure of a colorblind policy. Give us a sense of just like what constitutes a failure. Like what are we trying to achieve here?
Well, historically, the United States colleges before the Civil Rights Revolution were virtually all white. There's only a token presence of students of color in some places, none at all. That was considered a colorblind policy by the colleges at that time. Nothing really changed until the colleges decided to change it, partially because they were required to in the South by the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and in the rest of the country because they decided to, or were pressured to by their own students and communities. And in order to get the colleges significantly desegregated or significantly diverse, they had to consider race because there was such systematically unequal preparation that if they used the traditional standards of recruitment and admissions, it wouldn't work. Basically, that was the discovery of the Civil Rights Revolution in general. If you just said we should not discriminate in terms of voting rights, nothing changed. You had to actually require it to change. You had to have a plan to change it. That's what the colleges discovered in the 1960s when they began to become diverse significantly. And since then, the vast majority of selective colleges have had race-conscious admissions of one form or another. And there have been a succession of battles in the Supreme Court to try to defend it, or on the side of conservatives to get rid of it.
One thing I did not, I was not aware of, was that in the 1970s, the gap between black and white students at higher education relative to their population in the country had come close to closing. I was not aware of that.
Yes, right around 1977, 1978, there was a one-time in American history when students of color were equally as likely to enroll in college as white students. That doesn't mean they graduated, but at least they enrolled at very, very similar levels. That was right around the time of the Supreme Court decision, the first Supreme Court affirmative action decision in the Bakke case.
Let's go with the walls to providing for these opportunities. I mean, there's really, like, I guess, three main ones that you write about. Let's talk about exclusion.
Yes. Well, the history of higher education in the U.S. has been exclusion before the Civil Rights Revolution and race-conscious policies. Basically, colleges followed an admissions process, whether it was explicitly racist, as it was in 17 states where you had segregation by law, or in fact racist in terms of having requirements that made no sense in terms of the unequal preparation of students by race, regardless of what their native talent might be.
I'm sorry. We're having a little bit of sound problems here again. Sorry. Let's talk about preparation as a wall as well.
Yes, we think about higher education, and colleges often operate in higher education as if all students have a reasonable chance to prepare. But the reality is that schools that serve areas of concentrated poverty, which are usually areas of concentrated racial ethnic segregation, those schools are almost never equal in terms of preparation. They're not equal in terms of the peer groups that the students have. They're not equal in terms of the experience and expertise of the teachers. They're not equal in terms of the curriculum. And they're certainly not equal in terms of the preparation for the basic skills you need in a competitive college. How to think analytically, how to write, how to do research, and so forth. You just don't get those in many schools that serve concentrated poverty populations, which are overwhelmed by lots of other problems that relate to poverty and relate to really disadvantaged communities.
Let's talk about cost as a barrier. I also did not realize the dramatic change from essentially Reagan's entering office to more or less now in the percentage that Pell Grants provided for education.
Yes. The Pell Grant was created, grew out of the first the first policy to access higher ed for poor kids came in the middle of the Johnson administration. By the early 70s, it became the Pell Grant, named after Senator Pell from Rhode Island. The Pell Grant was originally set up so that it would pay the vast majority of the costs of going to a public four-year college. Now it pays less than a third. And ever since the conservative movement took charge in the early 1980s, states have cut their funding of higher education, public higher education, where most students go, and they have dealt with keeping colleges going by just shifting the tax burden from the public to the students and their families. That's just produced an enormous escalation in the cost of college. And without balancing increase in resources through Pell Grant and other forms of aid, it leaves poor kids in an extreme disadvantage. And many don't even try to go to the colleges they're qualified for. They just look at the price and the family says, forget it, kid.
And so, like, where are we now relative to where we were in the 70s in the wake of the civil rights movement? Like we had said earlier, that there was at least a semblance of parity relative to higher education as reflected, as a portion of population. Where are we today in that regard?
Well, we are better in terms of the percentage of kids who start college. It's not an equal percent, but the percentage of students of color who actually start college, if they finish high school, is high now. The problem is many of them start in 2 years of college, or really weak college, and they're gone by the end of the year. So they start college, but they get nothing out of it except maybe a debt. So in terms of completion of college, all groups are completing at a higher level, but the gaps are actually growing. And the requirements of the labor market for college degrees, and not only that, but for advanced college degrees, are increasingly demanding.
How did that growth track with the preponderance of student loans during that time period, also in the growth of that industry?
Well, the idea of the Pell Grant was to give grant aid, not a loan aid. The loan business came in when we shifted from really focusing on poor kids to focusing on middle-class kids as the cost of college went up. So that was dealt with by loans, which now receive more money from the federal government than the Pell Grants. The loans, of course, just mushroomed as the cost of college mushroomed and as family incomes didn't mushroom. So we've shifted from a policy that was intended to keep tuition low. The tuition was low in the 1970s. And now we have high tuition, and the counterpart of that is supposed to be high aid. We now have high tuition and low aid. And we have enormously unequal family incomes and unbelievably unequal family wealth.
Let's talk about the two cases that that are in front of the Supreme Court at this minute. One dealing with Harvard, one dealing with the University of North Carolina, brought by SFFA, which is a Students for Fair Admissions organization, a right-wing organization that is looking to essentially quash what remains of affirmative action in admissions process in colleges.
Yes.
Would you walk us through what the implications of these going away will be, and then we will talk about some of the suggestions that you have in the book to deal with this problem.
So what we're dealing with in the Supreme Court in the Harvard and UNC cases now are essentially the same issues that the Supreme Court dealt with in the Michigan case in 2003 and in the two cases from the University of Texas. The only thing that's changed, and the same group is finding them, it's a conservative organization that has a lot of black money, and they can't even, and they're trying to not, what the added focus is, they're trying to divide students of color by saying Asian students are being disadvantaged by affirmative action at Harvard. But the only difference, the only thing that's changed is the Reagan justices. So even though they lost the same case twice in the two Texas cases, the Fisher cases, they're back again because they think they have the votes. So the implications of these things are that you take the affirmative action policies, which are basically voluntary policies decided on by the great majority of selective colleges in the United States as necessary to produce even a semblance of diversity. And what they would do is to make all of those voluntary policies to integrate their campuses illegal and unconstitutional, and forbid colleges to do things that they had been praised for doing and even required to do for a half century. And all of a sudden, everything that was race conscious, if it's a sweeping decision, we don't know what it'll be, but if it's a really broad decision, almost everything that would be race conscious would be subject to attack right away. And in half of our states that are controlled by extremely conservative governments, it's very unlikely that anything much would survive. In other places, it would be a very complex situation that we've experienced here in California now since the 1990s, since we've had an affirmative action ban.
So what, let's assume for a moment that that's going to happen, because I think it's a pretty safe assumption. If I was a betting person, it would just be a question of to what degree will colleges be inhibited from considering race at all in the sort of multiple elements that they consider when they're talking about admissions, ranging from what high school you went to, I'm gender parity for the most part. I mean, there's just a half a dozen, if not a dozen, of these factors that they look at when they decide admission. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that the Supreme Court rules that is in some way unconstitutional. What then? I mean, I know you have a host of ideas as to like what we need to do. What would some of them be?
Well, one of them is we shouldn't give up on this. We should keep fighting it because there isn't going to be a really good alternative. In terms of the alternatives that you can work on, we should certainly work on the financial issue, which is a huge barrier to even fully qualified students of color who can meet normal admission standards. They don't go because of their family financial situation. We should have guarantees for at least the first year or two of college for kids who are highly qualified from really disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, there's a lot of students of color who aren't from extremely disadvantaged backgrounds, but have been discriminated against because of residential segregation and because of what happens inside of schools. They would not. It's really hard to think of a way to reach them directly. If we concentrate on high poverty neighborhoods and students who have lived with long-term poverty, we're going to get a minority population, but they're going to be in high schools that haven't prepared them. In terms of preparing kids in high schools, what we have to do is we have to create honest-to-God pre-collegiate courses in very disadvantaged schools where there aren't that many students who are prepared to take them. We have to be ready to pay to run those anyway, or we have to be prepared to transfer students to places where there is a path to college. We need more magnet schools operated under policies that actually reach out to and enroll really disadvantaged students and students of color systematically. We need to think about other aspects of inequality that will be legal to consider. We will be in the ironic situation that the only thing you can't consider is considering race, which of course is necessary to change race. The Supreme Court recognized that 50 years ago. But we could consider native language, for example. We consider bilingualism as an asset for getting to college. We could consider a number of things that would help some groups. Especially, it's easier to think about things that would help diversity for Latino students, for example. to think the most serious problems are for blacks and Native Americans. You don't have anything that's a relative proxy there that, except for poverty, and poverty doesn't work very well if you combine poverty with admissions requirements. We have a lot of evidence to show that it's just not adequate and that it excludes a lot of talented students of color. We could think about more dual enrollment programs so that we would have students from really bad high schools enrolled in community college courses, for example. We do a lot of that now, but it tends to be the more advantaged students that take advantage of those programs. We need to get students from really isolated areas onto campus somehow or other, period, and encourage them about going to college. We desperately need academic support for transition to college for students who've been denied decent high schools. And we have to think
these are all, I mean, they all sound like a good suite of policies, but where do these get implemented? So, I mean, we're talking about, on one hand, we're talking about like high school reform. On one hand, we're talking about providing free college opportunities, because all of this, I guess, is like there's no one big solution. There's just going to have to be a tiny bunch of bites and nibbles around this problem, because the primary tool that we have had as a society over the past 50, 60 years is about to go away. So, like, a lot of these things have.
We should be thinking about federal higher education policy in light of anything that's going to happen with the Supreme Court. And the problem, we shouldn't be thinking just about forgiving student loans, which I favor, but it's a very expensive policy and doesn't do anything for students who haven't gone to college yet or never went to college. So we need to think about really raising the Pell Grant.
Or what about? I mean, and I suggest this. I mean, without sort of, as we're not sort of like contemplating the political, I guess, chances of any of these things happening necessarily, but wouldn't a free college option in every state essentially achieve that most efficiently?
It wouldn't be adequate by itself. We had free college in California for a long time. You know, the City University of New York had free college for generations before the city went bankrupt in the 1970s. Free college is a really good idea, but it's not enough, because you still have the preparation problem and you have the support problem for kids who go to college. You have to live while you're in college. So you have to have some resources from somewhere in addition to no tuition. And if you have free college, you'd be aiding a lot of students who really don't need it as well. So, and it would be incredibly expensive. So you have to think about targeting these programs, or you have to think about getting a gigantic increase in resources going into higher education. Higher education has done really badly in terms of state resources since the 1980s.
Higher education as a private institution or as a public institution?
Public institution has done really badly in terms of the level of resources per student that the state governments have provided.
Right, I see. So there's been cutbacks on the state level.
Major cutbacks. The share of the cost of public higher education that's paid for by the public has gone way down. Here at UCLA, for example, the state of California provides less than a tenth of the cost of operating our university.
All right. Well, so what would you do first? I mean, putting aside sort of like the chances of it happening politically. I mean, I don't think there's going to be as much of a problem with people going to a free university who don't need to, as you might. But and I think one of the problems that we've seen with targeting this money is that it becomes extremely politically vulnerable. Well, there's a reason why we have seen over the course of, I guess it is 50 years, a 50% plus reduction in the amount that Pell Grants cover. And that's because it was targeted. That's my my story.
It's not targeted on in terms of race. It's targeted in terms of poverty. But I agree. The best thing to do would be to have free college and support systems and adequate preparation in high school. It would be terrific. It would be incredibly expensive. Just thinking about forgiving part of the debt from the last generation of mismanaged policy has such large costs, of course, that it's being sued and prevented now in courts around the country. Thinking about actually going to much more massive public funding of the basic functions of college would make a lot of sense for the future of our society, but it would require new resources that don't exist now, and they would have to be available on a sustained basis. I would be completely in favor of that if it could be done, with our existing political system.
Right.
Very unlikely.
Well, Gary Orfield, professor, co-director of the Civil Rights Project at UCLA.
Could I just add one thing?
Sure.
I think the first thing people should do, people in higher education, is the leadership of higher education should say two things. If this case is lost, they should say, we're not going to end this. We are going to find a way, and we are going to work with the communities of color in our communities, in our faculty, in our student body, and we're going to do everything that we can legally do to make sure that we don't go backwards into a really unacceptable situation where only the privileged get the chance for the higher education that our economy demands. I really think some signals like that are going to be very important, because if there is a sweeping decision, it's going to be incredibly disheartening.
I couldn't agree more. The book is The Walls Around Opportunity, The Failure of Colorblind Policy for Higher Education. Gary Orfield, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Good to be with you. Sorry for the snafu.
No problem. All right,
Take
thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, folks. Going to take a quick break, head into the fun half of the program today. Going to head in a little bit early. We will be talking about Balloon Boy, or whatever we're calling it now, flying over the country, and more. But just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only allow this show to survive and thrive, but you also get the free half, free of commercials, and you get the fun half. And then you get all sorts of little tiny, very sparse benefits on top of that. Like the app function. If you're a member, the app is free for everybody, but if you sign in as a member on the app, you get full search. You can search the entire 3,000 episodes that we have done of this program. And you get to IM the show in the fun half of the program. So check it out. Become a member. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, don't forget, JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. Emma, what's happening? What's happened to the Nets?
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually think they won that trade. We'll get into that in a little bit. On ESPN, we'll talk about the Kyrie Irving trade, some other rumblings ahead of the NBA trade deadline. Also, we'll do a deep dive into Brady's retirement. I'm a known Brady hater, but there's some things, of course, I have to give credit for. What are some of the best comebacks and moments of his career? I think we'll get into that. And then Jason Miles will be joining us of This Is Revolution. He wants to yell at me about Tua, among other things, and then that's what we'll be doing. So youtube.com/ESPN show.
Hard to give Tom Brady credit?
No, it's not hard. I mean, it's just, the first 3 Super Bowls, he was carried by a defensive performance, just kind of had to manage the game. Then
it was just a coincidence for the next 3.
No, I'm not saying there was a coincidence, just saying it's like, all right.
Quite a coincidence.
Yeah.
Anyways, also Matt is out of town, but Left Reckoning continues. You check that out.
Yes.
Tomorrow.
check that out tomorrow night. All right, 646-257-3920. We'll see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Anarchy. Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it to my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs that look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males...
Psych. Fuck them. Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100.
Can't knock the hustle.
Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the fun half of the program. We'll take some IMs. We'll open up the calls right now. 646-257-3920 is the number.